Welcome back to the Hip Hop Report. This is Rambo Hustle, and today we'll be discussing Freddie Gibbs' 3-song EP, RBT. Now, RBT stands for Rabbit Mode, something he's become familiar with and essentially associated with based on his previous presentation of the rabbit and the money signs, which was, copied by other artists. Anyways, with that being said, honestly, I was expecting and hoping for a deeper record or for a deeper project in itself. But, in a atmosphere in an industry that is currently so desperate for streams, and obviously part of this is because the streaming services themselves are basically underpaying the artists so disrespectfully in regards to what we get per stream, that it's no surprise that artists are trying to make the most out of every release, out of every album, while trying to release as many songs possible to get the artists and the fans to connect on as many records and as many sounds as possible while they generate as much income as possible. Now, Freddie Gibbs is no stranger to the idea of going against the grain and doing what's not popular or not normal, and definitely not a guy that's going to give you a bunch of radio records or trying to commercialize his music, his sound, or even his content for that matter. With that being said, with only 3 records though, you say, well, what can we actually accomplish in 3 records? But most of those people are not Freddie Gibbs. Now, coming from Gary, Indiana is obviously in itself a feat that would be hard to think about even from that scope. Now, for me, I first heard of Freddie Gibbs. He was working with somebody that I knew from back in Indiana, and they had a show coming up. So when I went to the show, connected with them, and checked out the show, I said, this guy is insane. This guy is going to be a huge problem. It was during that time I had already picked up some of his music, and I had a series during that time called Honor and Hustle. You can check that out on Dat Piff, and as well as pretty much anywhere else that had mixtapes during that time. Now, in Honor and Hustle, it was the time when essentially Nipsey Hussle, Pill, who else? Yellow Wolf, and Freddie Gibbs were both climbing the ladders and making their names known. But for me, I felt somewhat more connected to Freddie Gibbs because, one, he had a flow that we hadn't really heard since Twista and the Mob Stability Project, as well as he was coming from the Midwest. He was from Indiana, so naturally I was intrigued. I was curious. I wanted to know what Freddie Gibbs was all about. So the first record that I heard and I found was What It Be Like. Now, of course, I put that on the mixtape because coming from Indiana, every state, every city has their rough areas, their rough neighborhoods, or whatever the case is, and there's violence everywhere. But Indianapolis is very particular because I feel like for most people outside of Indiana, they think of Indiana as corn, as white people, as white in general. Most people would even go, oh, there's black people there, there's Latin people there. So for me, there's a sense of pride when you can go, yes, and it is dangerous. And it's not that we're proud of the danger or the crime or anything like that. But I think in a lot of ways, specifically in hip hop, a lot of major cities like your Comptons or LA in general, or New York with Harlem and Brooklyn, where they have a historical and recorded and acknowledged space where that there's crime and there's this sense of danger, it kind of gives those areas a sense of credibility in the sense of hip hop and the idea that you have street cred, right? Because you're from those areas. But in Indianapolis or in Indiana as a whole, you don't really get that. People assume that this is a safe area with safe place, and you don't really expect it to have crime the same way that you would expect Compton or South Central or, Jamaica, Queens to be dangerous. So I think Freddie Gibbs, in a lot of ways, coming from Gary, Indiana, which for a long time was damn near one of the most dangerous places in the country, it was the perfect person to land at the forefront of Indiana artistry. Unfortunately, Freddie Gibbs, I think, historically has connected more with Gary, Indiana, and Chicago more so than, say, Indianapolis, and rightfully so. Gary, Indiana is only maybe 45 minutes to an hour from Chicago, where obviously Chicago is also extremely dangerous and street culture culture is rampant, to say the least. Well, Gary, Indiana kind of holds that same crown in the sense of understanding not just talent, but also what danger is. And that's why artists like Michael Jackson get such a crazy following, because not only are you, historically the #1 pop artist in the world, but you also come from one of the most impoverished and worst areas in the country. And now with that being said, we get the three records that we get are Immigrants, produced by Bowie Wonder. We get Rabbit Mode, produced by Business Boy, as well as Axxion, produced by Thurston McCrae and Norva Denton. Now, the three records are extremely different, and they show very different sides of Freddie Gibbs. Now, for me, Immigrants comes in strong and starts to really paint the picture of who Freddie Gibbs is presenting himself as, correlating the struggles of our country right now as far as the political climate, and not just that, but specifically how that specific struggle right now with immigrants, ICE, and the discrimination against Latinos is affecting him in his business ventures. Now, with Immigrants, you do get a sense of Freddie Gibbs, I wouldn't say selfishly, but really him addressing how those things affect him, and not necessarily how they are wrong. But in that span, he also paints a picture that it is wrong and that it is a terrible thing that's happening, but also this is how it affects him personally. Now, in Rabbit Mode, we get a little bit different flow. Well, to me, this is probably the least consumable record on this project. Never get too low and never get too high off my highlights. I like this because one of my personal favorite quotes is, acknowledge your accomplishments, but don't stare at them. Meaning, celebrate what you accomplish, celebrate your wins, but don't get too stuck in the idea of championing that like you don't have more work to do, because there's always more work to do. So I think Rabbit Mode stands as one of those records that is him exercising his skill set and exercising his ability to rhyme and deliver his brand of flow and his double time delivery that we've come so familiar with Freddie Gibbs on. Now, I do want to highlight the third record, Axxion, because I think Axxion is probably one of the first times we've heard Freddie Gibbs, whether this is on purpose or on accident, create a record that I think has crazy potential. Now, this particular record is from a classic dancehall record from an artist named Mad Cobra, and a record that's titled Flex. Now, we've all heard this, even if you don't know who Mad Cobra is, even if you don't know what the record is, you've heard this record, whether on movies or if you're a music head, you just know this record. And for me, I think this has all the potential in the world to put Freddie Gibbs in rotation through the entire summer. I have this thing where I feel like artists that are authentically lyrical and that champion their lyrical ability, not only that, but that have been able to be successful doing that, tend to downplay and almost dismiss records like this that have the potential to really get them to a new bracket, to a new level in the game. And to me, I feel like Axxion is that.
Chick. Yeah. Chick.
Get my coffee.
When they let this club out, girl, I'm leaving. Bitch, I peep that I seen you scheming. Call me your angel. Standing on business. Yeah.
Where I don't think Freddie Gibbs' verses are repeatable. I think one of the key things of catchy records and commercially viable records is the ability for the audience to be able to actually rap along with you, which is what made Twist a kind of a hard act to sell, to brand him on a commercial access. Most of his records that went commercially successful were things like Overnight Celebrity and other records that had a singer on the hook, which is traditionally what hip hop would do. Is you rap this verse and then we bring in this real sultry, beautiful voice to come do this hook, and then that's where we get people. So I think this record has tons of potential because of that, and I hope that Freddie maximizes the potential of this record, because with only 3 records on this EP, he manages to at least get 1 out of 3 that could be smash hits if promoted and marketed correctly. So with that being said, I think Immigrants is a great record. To me, Rabbit Mode is probably the weakest out of the three, and Axxion brings you home and gives you something that you can listen to in the car, in the club, with a girl, whatever the case is. If you play this, that hook will take you home. With that being said, press play on RBT, Freddie Gibbs' brand new EP, available now everywhere. With the Hip Hop Report, this is Rambo Hustle.
Subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to the channel. If you want the latest and greatest, do it for the game. Music, breaks, these are the breaks. Music, breaks, these are the breaks.